Again, want to welcome you, those of you in the room, those of you joining us online. We're glad you're here. You're walking into week number 3 of a teaching series that we kicked off called Ascent. Now, if you missed the first week or two, that's okay. I want to encourage you to go back and check those out on our Facebook page, or you can go to our YouTube page and check those out as well. Thor filled in for me last week, did a phenomenal job. And so this whole idea, this concept of Ascent, it's taken from 15 chapters in the book of Psalms, the Old Testament book of Psalms. And I just love Psalms because it's so relatable, right? No matter what's going on in your world or what's going on in my world, we can connect our emotions, our feelings with something that was written there. If you're angry, there's a psalm that you can connect with because the psalmist sometimes was really angry about what was going on in their world. If you're excited and rejoicing, then you can connect because, again, the psalmist at points and times were exuberant and talking about the goodness of God. Regardless of where you're at or what you're feeling, we can connect there. But these particular psalms are really interesting. It's 15 psalms. It's 120 to 134. And this group of psalms is known as the Songs of Ascent or the Psalms of Ascent. Essentially, the Hebrew people, they were commanded by God to make 3 pilgrimages every year to celebrate feasts in Jerusalem. And so for those of us old enough to remember when cassette tapes were a thing, this was their soundtrack, right? Like this was their mixtape for when they were taking a trip. I know some of you are way too young to know what that means, but Google it. A cassette tape, it's a little square thing that you would put in. And if you were anything like me, didn't have, just a ton of money growing up, I would have to sit by the radio with a blank cassette tape in to catch the songs that I wanted to have if I was going to take a trip. Because my mom and dad weren't going to let me go out and buy all the cassettes that I wanted to get of all the different bands and all the different music I wanted to hear. So I had to steal them off of the radio. It wasn't stealing. It was just borrowing with the intent to never give back. But that's what I did. That's how I had to get my music. And so these psalms were kind of that road trip music for the Hebrew people as they traveled these 3 different times to Jerusalem. And much like they needed some road trip music. On our journey towards Jesus, and on our journey of faith, we need some music, we need some songs, some psalms in our mouths and in our hearts. So we're going to continue that conversation this morning, but before we do, I need to make a confession. Now, before I give my confession, I'm going to give a little bit of context for where my confession's coming from. So I am a personality junkie. Like, I love personality tests and personality profiles. I love those things. They are so just interesting to me because it lets me know all the different nuances and all the different things. And if there's a personality test or a personality profile, chances are I've taken it probably 5 times. Some of them I've taken a lot more than that. The one that is really kind of got all of my attention at the moment is called the Enneagram. Maybe you're familiar with it. If you're not, it's a old personality profile, thousands of years old, that essentially says that there are 9 different types of personalities, and all of us have all 9 of them somewhere within us, but we gravitate towards one as kind of our dominant, right? So there's one personality type or number that we gravitate towards. And this has been incredibly helpful for me as I've learned more about the Enneagram and I've learned more about the people in my immediate circle. So my family, my closest friends, it gives me a little understanding as to what's driving decisions that they make, why they're responding the way that they respond in certain circumstances and situations. But greater probably than learning about everyone else around me, it's given me a lot of insight about myself. And so here's where my confession comes in. I am an Enneagram type 3, which is also known as the performer. And here's what I've discovered about the performer. The performer, their core motivation is to appear successful. And their core fear is to not appear like a failure. My fear is appearing like a failure. I don't want to be perceived as a failure. I want to be perceived as successful. Now, honestly, I didn't need a personality profile to tell me that that was the case. Like, all my life, I've felt the need to perform. All my life, I've felt the need to be on and be better than what somebody else was. Not like I'm better than you, I think I'm better than you, but better like you think I'm better than somebody else. Like, it has meant so much to me in my life what you think of me, how you perceive me as a success, not as a failure. And because of that drive, because of that desire to be perceived as successful, it's caused me to be what some people would consider really hardworking, which is a great thing. But being hardworking also has a nasty downside. Being hardworking has the potential, when the motivation is, I want you to think I'm successful, to make me view everything about myself through the lens of how you see me. I'm going to say that again. When I'm driven by the desire to have a perception of success, everything that I do, every decision that I make is all filtered through the lens of how you look at me and whether you think I'm successful or not. That's a really uncomfortable conversation for us to have this morning. It's really vulnerable for me to share with you the struggles that I go with. So let's make it about all of us. Let's talk about all of our struggles, okay? Here's something that you know, and here's something that I know to be true. Our world is obsessed with success. The world that you and I live in is obsessed with success. We are driven by this insatiable, almost desire to be successful, to appear successful. And for us, success looks like accumulating stuff. It looks like rising to a particular level in our jobs. It looks like driving a certain car or living in a certain type of home or in a certain neighborhood. Success to us is something that we as Americans, we as humans are obsessed with. But the more I got to thinking about this, success really and truly isn't the end result. It isn't really success that we're pursuing. It isn't really success that we're looking for. It's significance, right? Like, we want to be significant. In fact, we want to ask these questions. Maybe we don't verbalize it this way, but here are some questions that we'll wrestle to the ground and we'll internalize and we'll ask ourselves. Do I matter? Do I matter? Am I going to last? Will there be a legacy? Like, am I going to last? Will people remember my name? Am I going to be able to provide for my family? Those are things that, whether we verbalize those or not, those are things that are the driving force behind a lot of us in desiring success. And I found this quote as I was preparing this week from Pastor Will Branch that I thought summed it up really perfectly. He says, behind the obsession with success that is in each one of us is that desire for significance. Why would we talk about that this morning? What does that have to do with anything that we've been discussing? Well, this desire for significance, this desire to pursue success, it's in direct opposition to something that Jesus has commanded us to do. Because here's what you think and here's what I think when it comes to success. We need to make it happen for ourselves, right? Like, we need to be the hardworking person. We need to be the one that's going to make it happen. Jesus, in Matthew's gospel document, in Matthew chapter 11, says it this way. He says, come to me, all of you who are weary and are burdened, and I'll give you rest. He continues, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, As I'm gentle and I'm humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Man, somebody in the room, somebody watching online, that's the thing you need to hear. That's the thing that you're craving. You want rest for your soul because, my goodness, it has been such a soul storm in your life the last little bit. He says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Jesus tells us the striving for success, the striving for significance, it's in direct opposition for what he's calling us to do. He's calling you, he's calling me to come and rest. How does this fit in with the songs of ascent? Well, the message that Jesus was speaking there wasn't new information probably to you, but it definitely wasn't new information to the Hebrew people. See, they had heard this same message over and over and over again. In fact, it was one of their songs they sang on their trip to Jerusalem. In Psalm 127, this is the only psalm in the Songs of Ascent that is accredited to King Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived. He had some really interesting things to say. So I want to encourage you this morning, if you have a Bible or you have a Bible app on your device or you have your sermon notes through YouVersion, go ahead and pull those out. Let's walk through this together. Psalm 127. Here's what the wisest man who ever lived had to say about striving for success. Here's what he says. Unless the Lord builds the house, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. This was a sentiment that obviously meant something to Solomon because he restated it in another little document that he wrote called Ecclesiastes. Here's how he worded it there in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verses 2 and 3. He says, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Some translations say vanity, utterly vain, total vanity. Everything is meaningless. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? He's reiterating the point that he wrote in Psalm 127. Unless the Lord does it all, it's pointless. So if we wanted to kind of alter some theology a little bit, we could use this to say what you've probably heard in your life, and I'm just going to confess something I've been guilty of saying at points in my life. Obviously, we don't need to do anything. We just need to let go and let God. You ever heard that theology? You just need to let go and let God take care of this. Like, I'm just going to let him handle it, and I'm going to sit back, I'm going to prop my feet up, I'm going to get something nice to drink, and it's going to be awesome. It's going to be like a day at the beach. No. That's incorrect theology. There are things that you can't accomplish that only God can. He is all powerful. But there are things that God will not do because you can do them. There's this partnership, this beautiful partnership that comes together where, yes, God is almighty, he is all powerful, and he can do anything. But he expects us to play our part too. Solomon even came to that conclusion in the end of Ecclesiastes. Here's what he said in Ecclesiastes 12. Now, all has been heard. Here's the conclusion. Like, after I've studied everything, here's the conclusion. Fear God and keep his commandments. This is the duty of all mankind. Like, here's the thing. You have a part to play. I have a part to play. God expects us to lean into him, to trust him, but he also expects us to do our part. Jesus, one of the final things that he said before he ascended back to the Father, Matthew's gospel document, chapter 28, we call it the Great Commission. Here's where Jesus reiterated. He said this, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. But he didn't stop there. He said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, Go. Therefore, get to work. Therefore, get busy doing what you're called and you're created to do. Therefore, go and make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey all the commands that I've given to you. And surely I'm with you always, even to the very end of the age. Both Solomon and Jesus had the same conclusion. God is all powerful. But you and I have a part to play. It's a partnership. At the end of the day, what Solomon wanted you and wanted me and wanted those Hebrew travelers who were on their way to Jerusalem to understand was that unless God is at the center of everything that we do, unless the Lord is at the center of every decision that we make, every step that we take, every work that we participate in, it's all pointless. Unless the Lord is at the center of it all, it's pointless. He continues in the first portion of verse 2. He says, in vain, you rise up early and you stay up late, toiling for food to eat. Can I ask you a personal question? You don't have to answer out loud, but I'm going to ask anyway. How many sleepless nights have you spent trying to figure things out? How many sleepless nights have you toiled? Have you laid there with your eyes awake, needing rest for your soul, but you can't go to sleep because your mind is working overtime and you're trying to figure it all out? How many times have you worked your fingers to the bone, metaphorically speaking, and then you look around and there's nothing to show for it? How many times have you put in so much work and you've tried to do it in your own power and in your own strength, and at the end of the day, it hasn't accomplished anything? That's what Solomon's asking. He's like, look, in vain you get up early and you stay up late, toiling for food to eat. Look at how he concludes verse 2. In vain you rise up early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat. For he grants sleep to those he loves. This is one of the most liberating verses in all the pages of Scripture. He grants sleep to those he loves. Can I tell you this morning, if you've ever wondered, God loves you. He loves you, your warts, your scars, your mistakes and failures. He loves you. And he offers sleep to those he loves. Maybe this is the most profound thing that you'll hear today. Maybe nothing else I say means anything to you, but there's somebody you need to hear this. Sometimes the godliest thing you can do is go to sleep. Sometimes the most Jesus-honoring thing you can do is take a nap. Get some sleep. You and I were not meant to bear the weight of figuring it all out on our own. Get some rest. Lean into the all-powerful God that you serve. If you're a follower of Jesus, lean into him and say, Lord, I'm doing everything that I can do, but I just don't have the strength to do it. I need some rest. I need some peace. I'm going to do my part, but God, would you do the part that I can't do? And would you let me lay down and sleep? Because your word tells me that you give sleep to the one that you love. And so, Lord, I need some sleep. Can I just ask you, how long has it been since you slept well? Since you laid down and you were able to put your burden down and say, Jesus, I'm doing everything I can, but I need you. And I need to sleep. I need to rest. I need some peace. See, we determine success in the world that we live in by how much we attain, by how hard we work, by how hard we strive, right? How many zeros are in the bank account. But God defines success by our faithfulness to and our trust in him. He's not looking at your bank account and comparing it to your neighbor's bank account. He's not looking at your title and comparing it to your neighbor's title. He's looking at you as someone that you love, as someone that he loves. And he's telling you, if you're faithful to me, if you will trust me, then you're a success. You're a success. So if you don't hear anything else I say this morning, you can go home, and if you need an excuse, you can tell them that the preacher said it's okay for me to take a nap this afternoon. You've got my blessing and my permission, and I'm on video. You can go back and show it to them. The preacher said it's cool for me to go take a nap. And then go sleep. And quit toiling. And quit staying up. And quit worrying and working, trying to make yourself successful. And lean into your walk with Jesus. Verses 3 through 5 in Psalm 127 seem to take a sharp left turn. So far, we've talked about everything being meaningless unless Jesus is at the center, unless God is at the center of it all, and finding rest in him. And then Solomon starts talking about kids. He starts talking about children. And if we wanted to bring in the great theologian from Sesame Street, one of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong, right? I mean, there's no correlation at all. But there is. I want to read the verses to you, and then we'll go back and talk about that correlation. Here's what Solomon wrote. Children are a heritage from the Lord. Offspring are a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Verse 5, blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their opponents in court. And can I just say, we should start talking about families with large children like they have a quiver full. That just should be part of our common language. Okay, maybe not, but it was a bad joke. Sorry. So what does this have to do with anything that Solomon's been talking about so far? Have you ever been on a road trip with kids? For those of us who have children, or those of us who have nieces or nephews or cousins or friends that we've tagged along and there's little kids, it can become incredibly tiring, right? It can be mind-numbingly difficult in some instances. And all the parents said amen, right? Like we love our children and wouldn't give anything up for them, would do anything for them. But let's be real. Sometimes taking a journey with kids is hard. Now, remember, the context of this is a journey, probably a 2-day journey at least, to Jerusalem, 3 times a year. And I can't prove this, but if they sang these songs and if they rehearsed or recited these psalms in the order that we have them in our Old Testaments, this is Psalm number 8. So this would be about the halfway point. And it's usually about the halfway point that a device starts to die. It's usually about the halfway point that you're getting questions. Are we there yet? Or he's touching me, or she's looking at me, and I've just created trauma for everybody in the room and watching online this morning because I'm taking you back to that last road trip that you were on where it was so difficult, right? Solomon took this opportunity in the midst of this halfway point, perhaps, to remind everyone on the journey where they were going, why they were going there, and who they had the honor and the blessing of carrying with them. He wanted them to take just a minute and step back and say, look, I know it's been a long 7.5, 8 mile walk already. And it's been tough, man. It's been tough. You're going uphill and it's dangerous. And I got you. I understand it. But I want you to stop for a minute and I want you to recognize you're on your way to worship God. And you're getting to take your babies with you. You're on your way to celebrate. And you've got these beautiful gifts around you that are traveling with you. He wanted the ancient Hebrews, and he wanted us this morning to understand that while the journey that we're on might get tiresome, we've got to keep our focus on who we're going to see. We've got to keep our focus on why we're going and why we're on this journey in the first place. When it comes to our children, they bring us great joy. There are moments that they bring us great heartache. There are times in your life and in mine when we've spent countless hours in prayer. We've spent countless hours racking our brains trying to figure out how are we going to help our kids understand and connect, and how are we going to help our kids know the right things to do? Man, there's some of us who maybe you've got children who are no longer living with you, and you've spent countless hours worried about the decision making that they're doing. And you're just trying to figure it out in your own strength. And you've gone through everything that you know how to do. Can I just tell you this morning? Everything that you set your mind and your heart to do, if the Lord isn't the center of it, even parenting, it's not going to be successful. As followers of Jesus, those of you in the room and watching online, if you're a follower of Jesus and God has blessed you to be a parent, you cannot parent. I cannot parent unless God is the center of my parenting, unless God is the center of every decision that I make when it comes to my children. He has to be the most important thing in everything that I do. And if he's not this morning, and if you've been beating yourself over the head trying to figure out how you can fix what's broken in your child's life or your children's life or in your life, can I just invite you to consider changing your focus? Can I invite you to consider not looking at yourself as the fixer and instead looking to the one who's all powerful? And instead of leaning into the one who has all authority, and instead leaning into the one who says, I'll never leave you or abandon you, but I'm with you. Our drive for success as parents, our drive for success in the business world, our drive for success for appearances, or for everyone around us, it's all rooted in a desire for significance. And no matter what you attain, no matter how many zeros are in your bank account, no matter the type of vehicle that you drive or the type of home you live in, the place that you stay, no matter how well behaved and adjusted and how upstanding of citizens your children may be, none of it will matter if God is not at the center, and none of it will bring the significance that you crave. outside of him. If we wanted to sum up the entirety of today's time together, of Psalm 127, all 5 verses, we can sum it up in this one statement. The significance that we all long for is only found in keeping God at the center of our lives. The significance that we long for, that thing that we seem to be striving for, the only place we will find it is when we keep God at the center of our lives this morning. So maybe this morning, you're here, you're watching online, and this has kind of resonated with you a little bit. Maybe you're like me, you're a type 3, you're a performer, and you feel the need to be on all the time and to get people to like you and to get people to think that you're successful. Can I just encourage you today? Walk away from that lie. Jesus looks at you as a son or daughter. God looks at you as a son or daughter. Jesus looks at you as part of his family. He looks at you if you've surrendered your life to him. And he says, because of my sacrifice on the cross, you're enough. I look at you and I see someone who is full of significance. I look at you and see someone who matters. Maybe you're in the room or you're watching online and your struggle isn't so much the desire for significance as much as it is you just a little bit of a control freak. Or maybe a lot of bit of a control freak. And you think the only way this is going to work out, the only way that I'm going to reach the preferred future that I have set out before me, that goal that I have set out before me, is that if I work 25 hours a day, 8 days a week, 400 days a year, like if maybe that's you. And can I just encourage you this morning? Can I ask you to consider taking a nap? Get some sleep. Lay the burden down you were never intended to carry. Because as awesome as you are, and let me tell you, you're awesome. You weren't created by God to carry that weight. As awesome as you are and as capable as you are, you still have limits. But he's limitless. And if we will lay that burden down and maybe just take a deep breath, just give him the place that he deserves, maybe we'll see a difference. I'm convinced that we will. I'm convinced that if that's you this morning, it'll make all the difference. Maybe you're here though, or you're watching, and all of this sounds great, but you're not really a follower of Jesus. Maybe you attend church, or you know a lot about him, you can talk about him, but you don't have a relationship with him. So this morning I want to ask you to consider Jesus. Consider this man who was fully God, fully man, who died on the cross for the sins of the world, and that includes yours. Rose from the dead 3 days later, victorious over death, hell, and the grave. Ascended to the Father in heaven, and he's seated there interceding for you and for me. He wants a relationship with you. Regardless of where you're at this morning, I want you to know he loves you. The never-ending, always and forever kind of love. And you can find rest for your soul in him. Father, in Jesus' name, thank you for the promise that you are with us. Thank you for the promise that we can lean into you. Thank you for the reality, for the truth, God, that we don't have to be all-knowing and all-powerful. We don't have to figure it all out in our own strength and our own ability. But we can rest in you. That God, when we keep you the center of our hearts, we keep you the center of our lives, we keep you the center of every decision that we make, of how we parent, of how we do our jobs, of how we handle our finances. Lord, something supernatural happens. It's in that sweet spot. It's in that place where we find hope, where we find life, where we find peace and rest for our weary, heavy souls. And God, as the band is about to play, it's there that we find a place of freedom.